How can somebody who's learning the Arabic language actually come to a position where they think in the Arabic language? I recently did an article on my website and published it on LinkedIn and elsewhere about how to actually start thinking in Arabic, because this is a question that I get from many students. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what it means to actually think in a language, and then we'll also get into some actual tips to improve your ability to think in another language, whether it be Arabic or whatever language you're speaking. These will apply even if you're learning another language too. So the first thing to bear in mind is that humans don't necessarily think in language. We don't necessarily think and form our concepts that we articulate in language necessarily. We think in kind of ideas and concepts, and it's a lot more abstract. And then we use the language capacity that we have to project those into the world. And sometimes we actually don't have the language capacity to project those into the world. Sometimes when we say things like, I love you more than I can explain, or I can't really find the words for that thing. These are instances of us really admitting the fact that we actually have concepts and ideas and we're thinking in a way which is not language, right? So that's something really important to bear in mind at the moment. But when we get into a position where we want to be quicker in using our language, the reason why students usually ask me this is because they're thinking in a process of Arabic word. Let's say Arabic word at the moment, ke's. Okay, ke's means a glass. We're going to use this as our example. People are thinking, ke's, glass, this. Okay, the actual concept of what it is, okay, separate from its words, separate to what it's called, this is a concept in itself, right? We have assigned the word glass to it, that's what we call it, and Arabic calls that a ke's. And the process of thinking in Arabic is really just removing the English word from it. It's getting familiar enough with saying ke's, to think to just, when you pick this up, a ke's, it's a ke's, right? This is like, like saying ke's for this is just as easy as saying glass for it. Right, we're not thinking like to say it in Arabic would be to say ke's, but it's a glass. It's a glass and it's a ke's, right? Like we need to remove the English hurdle in it. You know, if you imagine we have like ke's English to that, we need to remove this English and we just have ke's. You know, that's how we do it. And there are some ways to improve that ability and to practice that a little bit more. So the first thing that we need to do is actually use images in your notes, right? Like what we're doing all the time when we analyze texts that we walk through and things like this, we put little blocks around words and we say this means a glass, this means a table. We go through the story, like, but perhaps when we follow along with the Little Red Riding Hood series that we're doing on the Arabic in 60 Steps channel, you might come across the word, the word kelb, circle it and say this means a dog, right? But what's a good idea is rather than putting dog, drawing a picture of a dog, right? Because that'll help to remove dog. That'll help to remove kelb, dog, actual concept of a dog, right? You want to remove the word dog from that whole equation, right? You just want to go straight from kelb, have a kelb, this is a dog, right? You want to remove the English word in it. So one of the ways of doing it is using more images in your notes. So sometimes if you're like me, your drawing is just horrible, right? And actually that can actually be easier, like using stick men and stick animals and stuff, or using kind of an image which represents the animal somehow, even if you're not doing the whole animal, like with a lion, just doing like its face, like a lion's mane and the face or whatever. Sometimes if the pictures are horrible, they're more memorable even, so don't necessarily think because you're not an artist you can't use that technique. But yeah, using images in your notes is a really good way. The second way is to stop translating everything, right? Like that, it's kind of building on what I said previously about using images instead of translating the word, right? But I actually mean it beyond that. I actually mean, for example, if you do a reading comprehension exercise in Arabic, I remember being in my first year at university and we had reading comprehension activities and we had translation activities. And lots of students ended up taking way too long on the reading comprehension activities because they had this Arabic text and they're like, I need to translate it into English to be able to understand it and then answer the questions. But I remember saying to them, no, you read it in Arabic, you understand it in Arabic, and then you answer in Arabic. Like you remove the whole need to go to English for it. Like, and if you're a person who practices making the connections directly from the concept to the Arabic word in your mind, it's much easier to do that. Right, so you don't want to be in the practice of translating everything. You want to have a direct understanding of what that word is, from concept to Arabic word, or whatever language you're learning. A level above that is to actually use other words in Arabic for Arabic words. Right, like this is a way of building kind of more connections in your brain around a particular unit of Arabic vocabulary, but not building those connections with concepts in English and words in English, but building them with other concepts you're familiar with in Arabic. So if you say, كأس الماء, a glass of water or whatever, ما معنى ماء? What is ماء, right? You might put some words that are similar. For example, you might just use words like مطر, بحر, nahar. You use words, bahar meaning the sea, muhit meaning an ocean, nahar meaning a river. Like, just use words like that surrounding it, other words for it and close words to it that you can build the connections with, rather than building the connections with English words. And that's kind of a higher level because you need more synonyms to hand, but it's actually quite easy nowadays with lots of websites that there are to find synonyms for different Arabic words. And even if you know synonyms in English, and in the beginning you need to go to a dictionary and find what, if we're to do, if you were doing it with a book, for example, right? Like, you wanted to build a connection in your brain from the word riwaya. Okay, a riwaya is a novel. Okay, a riwaya is a word for a novel. Okay, so what is a riwaya? Okay, we say that it's a kitab. Okay, we say it's a قصة طويلة في كتاب واحد. Okay, it's a long story in one book, right? That's what a novel is, really. Okay, it's a narrative and stuff as well. You can use other words like that, right? When you're building the communications in Arabic rather than in English. So those are some ways that you can actually start to think in Arabic and actually start to think about that in a different way. Like, a lot of the time I hear people talk about things like dreaming in certain languages. Honestly, like, I think about language all the time. Every day I'm thinking about how language works, how do we produce it, what do things really mean? And I don't know if I've ever dreamt in language. I don't know if I've ever had a dream in English, let alone in another language. Like, the ideas and concepts that are going on in a dream, they're not confined by orally saying something, are they? So you're quite often just interacting with people and they're saying things and you just know what they mean a lot of the time. It's quite often when you're recounting a dream, it's actually quite hard to quote exactly what people said because it's not really restricted to the language that they're using. It's not like in a dream you have to wait for someone to finish their sentence. You just know what they're communicating because it's outside of the restrictions of our human language. So so I think sometimes we need to think a little bit about that when we're talking about how do I start thinking in Arabic a little bit more. Really, it's just about building the connection from concept to Arabic word. So that's it for this video here on the Sam Martin Burr channel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.